Welcome to the session on Far Eastern Art, Part 1, Chinese Art. Far East is a term often used for East Asia and Southeast Asia combined. The history of Far Eastern art includes a vast range of influences from various cultures and religions. While the earliest non-paintings in East Asia were painted on the walls of tombs during the last 2 millennia, a variety of distinctive portable formats for viewing and storing paintings and calligraphy were developed and are common with certain nonsense to all three countries of China, Korea and Japan. In this session, we will go for an overview of the art history of these three regions, starting with Chinese art. Art of China. The Chinese culture is one of the world's oldest known culture and is also considered to be one that is full of mystery and many complex elements. The vast area that the country of China expands over has a great amount of regional diversity with regards to the customs and traditions that are prevalent. Early Stone Age art in China dates back to 10,000 BC, mostly consisting of simple pottery and sculptures. After this early period, Chinese art, like Chinese history, is typically classified by the succession of ruling dynasties of Chinese emperors, most of which lasted several hundred years. In Chinese art, the stabilizing effect of tradition was respected, but so was individual creativity. How to build a style into a personal instrument of expression, how to reach a balance between objective description and subjective comment, how to endow the formal materials of painting with a human content so that its meaning need not to be bound to the literal or symbolic meaning of its subject matter were some of the chief concerns of the Chinese painter. Early forms of art in China are found in the Neolithic Yangshuo culture, which dates back to the 6th millennium BC. The early ceramics were unpainted and most often code marked. The first decorations were fish and human faces, but these eventually evolved into symmetrical geometric abstract designs, some painted. But the most distinctive feature of Yangshuo culture was the extensive use of painted pottery, especially human facial, animal and geometric designs. The Bronze Age in China began with Xia dynasty. In the following Shang dynasty, more elaborate objects including many ritual vessels were crafted. The Shang are remembered for their bronze casting, noted for its clarity of detail. Shang bronze smiths usually worked in foundries outside the cities to make ritual vessels and sometimes weapons and chariot fittings as well. Some forms of bronze vessels such as the ku and jiu can be very graceful, but the most powerful pieces are the ding, sometimes described as having an air of ferocious majesty. It is typical of the developed Shang style that all available space is decorated, most often with stylized forms of real and imaginary animals. By the varying state period, that is, a period in ancient China following the spring and autumn period and concluding with the victory of the state in Qin in 221 BC, creating a unified China under the Qin dynasty. Bronze vessels had become objects of aesthetic enjoyment. Some were decorated with social scenes, such as from a banquet or hunt, while others displayed abstract patterns inlaid with gold, silver, or precious and semi-precious stones. Shang bronzes became appreciated as works of art from the Song dynasty when they were collected and prized not only for their shape and design, but also for the various green, blue-green and even reddish patinas created by chemical action as they lay buried in the ground. The terracotta army inside the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor consists of more than 7,000 life-size tomb terracotta figures of warriors and horses buried with the self-proclaimed first emperor of Qin, that is Qin Shi Huang, in 210 to 209 BC. The figures were painted before being placed into the vault. After the civil war that followed the death of Qin Shi Huang, China was reunited under the rule of the Han Dynasty, which is divided into two major periods. The Western or former Han during 206 BC to 9 AD and the Eastern or later Han during 25 to 220 AD. The Han Dynasty was known for jade burial suits. One of the earliest known depictions of a landscape in Chinese art comes from a pair of hollow tile door panels from a Western Han Dynasty tomb near Zhengzhou, dated 60 BC. A scene of continuous depth recession is conveyed by the zigzag of lines representing roads and garden walls, giving the impression that one is looking down from the top of a hill. This artistic landscape scene was made by the repeated impression of standard stamps on the clay while it was still soft and not yet fired. However, the oldest known landscape art scene tradition in the classical sense of painting is a work by Zhang Ziqin of the Zhou dynasty during 581 to 618. Buddhism arrived in China around the 1st century AD, and through to the 8th century it became very active and creative in the development of Buddhist art, particularly in the area of statuary. Receiving this distant religion, China soon incorporated strong Chinese traits in its artistic expression. In the 5th to 6th century, the northern dynasties, rather removed from the original sources of inspiration, tended to develop more symbolic and abstract modes of representation with schematic lines. In ancient China, painting and calligraphy were the most highly appreciated arts in court circles and were produced almost exclusively by amateurs, aristocrats and scholar officials. Calligraphy was thought to be the highest and purest form of painting. Writing as well as painting was done on silk, but after the invention of paper in the 1st century, silk was gradually replaced by it. Original writings by famous calligraphers have been greatly valued throughout and Chinese history and are mounted on scrolls and hung on walls in the same way that paintings are. The hanging landscape scrolls attributed to the Southern Sung school and are supposed to be the expression of that contemplative phase of Buddhism called Zen in Japan and Chan in China. The Chinese accept the nature in their art as they find it and seem to understand their place in the world as being part of it. They make no such sharp distinction between man and beast as the West does. It is also important to note what the Chinese were thinking of and what they meant by the 6 canons of painting laid down by He Ho. The 6 canons of Chinese brush painting. In the 5th century AD, He Ho wrote the 6 canons of painting, which form the basis of all Chinese brush painting to this very day. They are circulation of the Kai, breath spirit, vital force of heaven, producing movement of life. This is in the heart of artist. Brushstroke creates structure. This is referred to as the bone structure of painting. The stronger the brushwork, the stronger the painting. Character is produced by a combination of strong and lighter strokes, thick and thin, wet and dry. According to the object, draw its form. Draw the object as you see it. In order to do this, it is very important first to understand the form of the object. This will produce a work that is not necessarily totally realistic, but as you see it, thus the more you study the object to be painted, the better you will paint it. According to the nature of the object, apply color. Black is considered a color, and the range of shadings it is capable of in the hands of a master painter creates an impression of colors. If color is used, it is always true to the subject matter. Next, organize compositions with the elements in their proper place. Space is used in Chinese brush painting the same way objects are used. The space becomes an integral part of the composition. In copying, seek to pass on essence of the master's brush and methods. To the Chinese, copying is considered most essential, and only when the student fully learns the time-honored techniques can he branch out into areas of individual creativity. The landscape paintings of the Southern Sung school are not limited to the large hanging scrolls. They have also produced horizontal scrolls. These scrolls can run into any length, and it is notable that in the Ming and Qing periods they grew longer and were sometimes praised for sheer length. The Tang dynasty is known for its contribution to the world of Chinese art in the form of figurine painting. The artists of that time drew inspiration from the courtly life, animals and human figures. Chinese landscape paintings that are held in great esteem today also began to flourish during the rule of the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 906. Boldly syncretic, the arts of Tang dynasty exhibit myriad international influences that were absorbed through diplomacy, conquest, trade and pilgrimage. A popular theme for Tang court painters was that of foreign ambassadors submitting tribute to the emperor. As with calligraphy, the most popular materials on which paintings were made were paper and silk. The finished works were then mounted on scrolls which could be hung or rolled up. The traditional painting was also done in albums, on walls, lacquer work and in other media. Dong Yan was an active painter in the southern Tang kingdom. He was known for both figure and landscape paintings. Zhang Ziqin was an important painter during the Zhou dynasty. By the late Tang dynasty, landscape painting had evolved into an independent genre that embodied the universal longing of cultivated men to escape their quotidian world to commune with nature. Such images might also convey specific social, philosophical or political convictions. As the Tang dynasty disintegrated, the concept of withdrawal into the natural world became a major thematic focus of poets and painters. Faced with the failure of the human order, learned men sought permanence within the natural world, retreating into the mountains to find a sanctuary from the chaos of dynastic collapse. Painting was no longer about the description of the visible world. It became a means of conveying the inner landscape of the artist's mind. By evoking select antique styles, the scholar painters could also identify themselves with the values associated with old masters. Ma Yuan was an influential Chinese landscape painter of the Song dynasty whose work, together with that of Xia Gui, formed the basis of Mark Xia school of painting. A characteristic feature of many of his paintings is the so-called one-corner composition, in which the actual subjects of the painting are pushed to a corner or a side, leaving the other part of the painting more or less empty. Ma Yuan's lyrical and romantic interpretation became the model for many later painters. Zhao Mengfu was a Chinese scholar, painter and calligrapher during the Mongol Yuan dynasty. His rejection of the refined, gentle brushwork of his era in favor of the cruder style of the 8th century is considered to have brought about a revolution that created the modern Chinese landscape painting. There was also the vivid and detailed works of art by Qian Xuan during 1235 to 1305, who had served the Song court and out of patriotism refused to serve the Mongols, instead turning to painting. He was also famous for reviving and reproducing a more Tang dynasty style of painting. The later Yuan dynasty is characterized by the work of the so-called four great masters: The Four Masters of the Yuan dynasty is a name used to collectively describe the four Chinese painters Huang Gongwang, Wu Zhen, Ni Zan and Wang Men. They worked during the Yuan period and were revered during the Ming dynasty and later periods as major exponents of the tradition of literary painting, which is concerned more with individual expression and learning than with outward representation and immediate visual appeal. Literary painting was conceived as mode through which the Confucian Junzi expressed his ethical personality. It was much less concerned with technical showiness. Literary painters specialized in plain ink paintings, sometimes with minimal color. They lay great emphasis on the idea that the style with which a painter controlled his brush conveyed the inner style of his character. Brushstrokes were seen as expressions of the spirit more than were matters of composition or skill in realistic depiction. The most notable of these was Huang Gongwang during 1269 to 1354. Whose cool and restrained landscapes were admired by contemporaries. Another of great influence was Ni Zan during 1301 to 1374, who frequently arranged his compositions with a strong and distinct foreground and background, but left the middle ground as an empty expanse. This scheme was frequently to be adopted by later Ming and Qing dynasty painters. During the Ming dynasty, when native Chinese rule was restored, court artists produced conservative images that revived the song metaphor for the state as well ordered imperial garden, while literary painters pursued self-expressive goals through the stylistic language of Yuan scholar artists. Zheng Zhou during 1427 to 1509, the patriarch of the Wu school of painting, centered in the cosmopolitan city of Zhushu, and his preeminent follower Wang Zhengming during 1470 to 1559 exemplified Ming literary ideals. Morally charged images of reclusion remained a potent political symbol during the early years of the Manchu Qing dynasty, a period in which many Ming loyalists lived in self-enforced retirement. Often lacking access to important collection of old masters, loyalist artists drew inspiration from the natural beauty of the local scenery. The individualist painters included Bada Shandran during 1626 to 1705 and Jitao 1641 to 1707. They drew more from the revolutionary ideas of transcending the tradition to achieve an original individualistic style. In this way, they were more faithfully following the way of Dong Qingchang than the orthodox school, who were his official direct followers. As the techniques of color printing were perfected, illustrated manuals on the art of painting began to be published. Jiziguang Huangzuang, Manual of the Mustard Seed Garden, a 5-volume work first published in 1679, has been in use as a technical textbook for artists and students ever since. The Shanghai School is a very important Chinese school of traditional arts during the Qing dynasty and the whole of the 20th century. Under efforts of the masters from this school, traditional Chinese art reached another climax and continued to the present in the forms of Chinese painting. Images of nature have remained a potent source of inspiration for Chinese artists down to the present day. While the Chinese landscape has been transformed by millennia of human occupation, Chinese artistic expression has also been deeply imprinted with images of the natural world. Viewing Chinese landscape paintings, it is clear that Chinese depictions of nature are seldom mere representations of the external world. Rather, they are expressions of the mind and heart of the individual artists. Cultivated landscapes that embody the culture and cultivation of their masters. Here we conclude this session on Chinese art. Thank you.